Good evening and welcome to the latest in the instalments of the Shooting Straight series that is done by myself, Voice of the Forge. And today I am quite upset. There's a lot of things that have happened recently which I am not happy about at all, and they cover quite a few diverse topics. My first is that we now have another expo, another convention, turning around and telling people that certain symbols and certain words and certain groups are deemed hateful or hate speech, and using such warm and fuzzy logic that, if someone says that something is harassment, then it is harassment. Once again, we are bending our knee and genuflecting to the God of the mortally offended by people who are offended by the slightest thing. Oh no, the sun is shining, I am offended. Oh look, the grass is green, I'm offended. Oh look, someone just looked at me, I am offended. It is perpetual abuse of the legal system. And what people don't seem to realise is that this is one of the narcissistic and sociopathic things that abusers do in their private lives. They make it so that their partners cannot say certain things without there being repercussions, both verbal and or physical. And what happens is these people get alienated, they get separated from their loved ones, they get separated from their friends, they get separated from any kind of support network they have, and they are ground down time and time and time again until their self-worth is so eroded that there's abuse like, well, nobody else will have you. This is what we are seeing. We've seen it at the start of Gamergate. We've seen it with the very first instance that one of the lead names with the whole Zoe post thing, she was an emotional, manipulative abuser. And we do not say this in society. It's always the man that's the aggressor. It's always the man that's the abuser. And I have to tell people that no, it isn't. It isn't. Nearly 40% of domestic violence cases are against men. And yet this is a great truth that nobody seems to want to talk about. Christina Hoff Sommers debunks these things. She debunks these facts as part of the American Institute, as the I believe she's the factual feminist, and it really gets to me that we have these people that are now in a position, just because of what is between their legs, just to turn around and say, I'm not happy with A, I'm not happy with B, I'm not happy with C, and because you are different to me, therefore I can ruin your life with 2 or 3 words. We've seen it with the honey badgers. Because they weren't doing things right, because they're women with a men's rights advocacy twist to what they do, and are identify as second wave feminists, not third wave feminists, therefore they are womaning wrong. They are told, you aren't doing it the way we want to, therefore we will take away your ability to do it. You do not fit in with our plan, therefore we will exclude you. It is the policy of the playground, and it is the policy of the abuser. Divide and rule. Cut off avenues for people to talk, cut off avenues for escape, cut off the ability for people to get together, to turn around and say, actually, it isn't just me. This person says this person says that, this person says the other. To me, it is endemic in the whole thing. When we go back to the Zoe post, he posts evidence of gaslighting, of all kinds of things, and what effectively could be considered rape. Were it not for the fact that we have changed the definitions so far from what they originally were that no woman realistically will ever get anywhere near that kind of charge. and it is sickening that we have these people in today's society that promote inclusivity, diversity, that include these things about safe spaces, and they exist purely to have people their own way, to throw a temper tantrum because they can't manage their own feelings and everyone else has to manage them for them. Very famous quote, and I believe it's attributed to Stephen Fry. If not, Stephen Fry has used it on numerous occasions, but basically it is, I'm offended is just a shorthand way of saying you have to police my emotions because I'm not grown up enough, I'm not mature enough to do it for myself. And this is becoming a major issue. We've seen Honey Badger, we've seen Brianna Wu at RavenCon kick somebody out for taking a picture as a panel is setting up and about to start. They then explain, after they've removed somebody, that there's to be no recording, to be no... Why not? It's a public space, and people are there to hear a certain worldview. Well, if you're not embarrassed about your worldview, why are you trying to hush it up? I'll tell you why. Because you'll say things and people will want to verify and fact check what you've said, and if there's no recording of what it is that you've said, you can say that it's taken out of context, or that you didn't say it in that way, or that the tone was wrong, or any number of excuses to turn around and say that wasn't what I meant, or that wasn't what I said, and it's then your word versus somebody else's. We should now, in this society, record everything. Why? Because it protects us. If someone turns around and says, you called me effing, jeffing, this, that and the other racial epithet, nasty name, and you could have got a recording saying, actually I was very polite to you and this is actually what I said and this is your response and you were actually quite hateful towards me, then that's what we will have to go down. We will have to live in a world where we can't trust that the most basic things that make up a society won't be reported on, like some kind of Stalinist Russia, that people won't try and use the law to their own ends to try and get one up on a neighbour, to get it one up on friends that have fallen out. And this whole thing of trying to suborn our language and trying to suborn culture so that we can fit these man and woman children into some kind of working flexibility. Now I know that I will be digging a massive hole for myself because not everyone knows who I am, but there are those out there that listen to me that know exactly who I am, and there is someone that I know, and I don't care what they are. I don't care what they identify as. All I know that they're a mouthy, obstreperous, jumped up elitist little fuck. Right? That's it. So what if you're swanning around with stubble and lipstick? I don't give a shit. Be a nice person, and I might actually give you the time of day. But every time I've seen you, you're ranting, you're raving, you're virtually frothing at the mouth. Why would I want to get to know someone like you? And you just turn around and say, well, you've judged me because you're transphobic, or you're this phobic, or you're this hateful person. And I'm just there going, no, I just don't like twats. And this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that in any other sphere would themselves be laughingstocks. They would be ostracised from the group because they make no effort to join in. The group has to kowtow to them. The group has to change its rules to fit them, rather than just turning around and go, no, when you grow up, when you feel like stop being a dick, we'll consider it. And this is completely ass backwards. It really is. And I really am upset tonight. I don't know what's kicked it off, but it's this whole thing with this sense of entitlement to throw your teddy out the pram, to shout and scream and wail that the world owes you something, when in fact the world doesn't give a shit. The world owes you a nothing. The only niche that you can carve out for yourself will be the only bit the world gives a fuck about, and that's because you've created it. Nothing ever will give a shit about anything. unless you give a shit about somebody else, because it's when we get into those interpersonal relationships where we find those significant others that we share our most tender and guarded moments with. That's when we can finally see the beauty of interconnectedness and human relationships. But these are people with stunted emotional intelligence. They are sociopathic in the extreme. They are incredibly narcissistic. Nothing can just be simply about one thing. It always has to be about them. They always have to turn the argument back on itself and say, well, actually, what about me? And to be honest with you, most of the time we couldn't give two fucks what about you, because it wasn't about you in the first place, and you're just rambling off because you feel like it. And what's kick-started all this off? Well, as I've mentioned, there's been 3 expos named. We've had Calgary Expo and the Honey Badgers. We've had RavenCon and the Ralph Retorts with Brianna Wu. And we've now got DenverCon turning around and saying that if you wear certain types of t-shirt with certain sizes of symbols, that will be considered hate speech to those poor little namby-bamby people who have to live in a bubble, and if anyone should touch them, their skin will fall off because they're such sensitive little delicate special snowflakes. And on top of all this, we've just now had the mother of all campaigns against Protein World about a fitness and healthy eating supplement, fat shaming, defacing of posters. Just what were they thinking? Now, kudos to Protein World. They have stood their ground, and they've basically stuck 2 fingers up to these people. They've turned around and said, yeah, the marketing we've had the back of this outrage has been fantastic. Thank you very much. We've got 5,000 new customers out of it. We would never have had it's free column inches. It's free. We couldn't have paid for this kind of publicity. Cheers very much. And they've basically rubbed the social justice warriors' nose in it. Why can't we have more of this? Why is it that as soon as someone disagrees with something, we have a change.org petition? Why is it that we have this outrage culture that perpetually seems to find things to be outraged about? Is it the fact that these people have no meaning in their lives, that their lives are that bereft of meaning, that they are like dogs that are bored, that just bark at everything that passes purely because they've got nothing better to do? They are that empty, just empty shells. They're not living, they're existing. Who the hell has the right to be offended, right, about the way in which women's bodies are portrayed in today's media? Really? I mean, let's be honest here, right? When you look at the way in which women are portrayed on the fronts of covers of magazines, most of that's to attract other women, right? They're not marketing to men. When you're talking about all these bloody magazines, a good proportion of them are marketed towards women, not towards men at all, right? And then, to top it all off, we've just had 8 weeks of Aidan Turner being panted after by everybody, by every woman known to man in Poldark. The amount of column inches that has been spilt on idolising this actor who has been in other things and wasn't recognised before, and yet I thought it was far better roles. These people have had no shame. And if a man had been writing about a woman the way that the women had been writing about the man, then there would have been outcry from the sisterhood. It would have been unbelievable. And yet, we have this juvenile thing where, oh, we can say it, but you can't because you've got the power, because you've got patriarchy. It's complete and utter twaddle. There is nothing about it at all which is worthwhile. And so we go from here. We go from this whole thing of, right, you can't wear this, you can't look like this, you can't say this, fat is beautiful too, even though it will lead to all kinds of health depleting diseases, and it's not necessarily good for you. At the end of the day, I don't care. I'm no model specimen. I've got issues. I've got issues with what I eat, the way I eat, and the medication that I take. I don't have an excuse. I know full well that I'm rounder than I should be, that I'm flabbier than I should be. I just don't care. At the end of the day, the amount of stress that it had put on my system to worry about it day in, day out would actually do me far more harm than being a relaxed attitude, knowing that I don't eat healthy enough and trying to change it over time slowly. That is a far more body positive fact than turning around and going, I'm fat, therefore I'm going to crash diet. I'm fat, I'm going to eat these pills, which, by the way, we've had several deaths about because people are selling illegal things, not for human consumption, that have effectively burnt through people's insides because they wanted to get thin, because of the fat shaming and because of the thin shaming that goes on in today's society. When we look at women, people tend to have one view, but then when we look at Aidan Turner and we look at Beckham and all the rest of it, oh no, that's a completely different story there, and we can have completely different double standards. Oh yes, it's ridiculous. And finally, the last thing, and this to me just sums up the stupidity, the inanity, right? We have a drag artist, right, and you'll get the pun when I give you the name, right, Ms. Sam Booker, okay, right, Sam Booker, as a drag artist, and they are doing a routine that they've been invited to do, drag act, stand-up comedy kind of thing, and because someone disapproved of the act, they pulled a fire alarm to disrupt the proceedings. Really? That's what we've come down to. I don't agree with your jokes, therefore I'm going to pull a fire alarm and force everyone to evacuate the building and ruin your set. And this was in York, UK. York University. Meant to be one of the better universities in the country. Not the sort of soft, liberal, waffy elite that we see down in London with things like the economic university that they've recently had issues with segregated talks for Muslims, because the women and the men can't sit together, they must be separated, and all kinds of exclusionary policies like that. Oh no, this was meant to be one of the other universities that has a good reputation. And there's this whole thing about the Women's Student Union, who I've mentioned in the past, who were triggered by clapping, who want to kill all men. Right now, men, they're saying, can't dress up in women's clothing because apparently it's not right for them to do so because they've said so. I'm sorry, but can women wear men's clothes? Of course they bloody well can. They couldn't always. There has been a time when women were stopped from wearing men's clothing, and in Paris I think it was actually a law that you couldn't wear men's clothing for a while if you were a woman, because it was considered transvestitism. But now, who cares? Who gives two hoots? Look at what Lady Gaga wears, for crying out loud. And yet we're so hung up about what men are doing, the boys' club. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of it that seems to be women that don't get that men and women can do different things and still be friends. I think these are people that at some young age have been traumatised by some boy, and they've never ever let go of that hurt, of that hate, of the vitriol that they had when they were 3. Because what they do is they throw toddler tantrums, which is why they need safe spaces with bubbles and pictures of puppies frolicking. They've never grown up. They've never learnt the emotional stability to be able to take a knock and carry on. To me, it just cries of someone wasn't allowed in the Wendy house by a boy, therefore we've got to kick all the boys out of their forts kind of mentality. It is ridiculous, it is infantile, it is juvenile, and it has no place in a modern 21st century civilization, whether it's in England, in UK, in China, in Japan, or anywhere. And noticeably, it doesn't exist in all these places. There's different problems, there's real problems. And because of that, we don't have these whiny children that are kiddles trying to ruin everything for everybody else just because they're not happy with whatever has been dealt out to them by the way life has turned out. I've got one word. It's called tough. Suck it up, buttercup. Get with it. I thank you for listening to this rather ranty edition of Shooting Straight. I am, as always, Voice of the Forge. You can follow me at Voice of the Forge or on the YouTube channel Voice of the Forge. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and if you ever want to comment or ask questions or actually want to get my opinion on various things, please feel free to contact me, to tweet at me or leave a message, and I'll see what I can do to get you worked into the next episode. Thank you and good night.